welcome to the CEO Speaker Series. I'm Caden Vittorini, CEO and founder of VitFab, your host. And today we're joined by Larry Sand, who is a seasoned broadcast executive and entrepreneur with more than 25 years of leadership experience. Larry's held major roles across the Univision network, including president of Univision Puerto Rico, regional vice president and general manager of Univision Chicago, and general manager of Univision Sacramento. Along the way, he built high-performing teams, led major turnarounds, and consistently grew audiences and revenue in some of the country's most competitive media markets. Larry is now the president of Creative Bone Consulting and Management, where he works with organizations across a range of industries and coaches leaders who want to grow with intention. What sets Larry apart is his blend of strategic insight and genuine people-first leadership. He brings a grounded, practical approach that helps leaders think bigger, operate smaller, and create real impact in their organizations and communities. We're excited to have you on tonight. In this series, Larry's all about asking leaders what they wish they knew when they were in college. So let's get right into it. So let's start from your path from student to now CEO. Tell us a bit about it. Maybe your first job, major career decisions, just overall leadership milestones.
Well, sure. Caden, thanks for having me. And I look back and I always tell the same story of there I was a senior in college, and my uncle was very, very well connected, and he happened to know a man in New York that was he was the CEO of a major broadcast group. It was Westinghouse Group W at the time. And he said, Larry, don't worry, I'm going to get you an interview. And I had already been on the air as a disc jockey as a kid and had worked in commercial radio for a number of years. And so I thought, well, I mean, I'm coming out with a college degree and I've already got all this experience. They're going to love me. So I go to this interview and I get my one suit that I had and I fly to New York, or actually, I think I drove to New York actually. And so I drive to New York and I get an interview, and I go to walk in the door and the receptionist pushes this little button underneath her desk that unlocks the door to the CEO's office. And I walk in and I sit down and I am ready for him to offer me an amazing job because, hey, look at all the experience I've gotten. I've just graduated from college. And he looks at me and he says, yeah, what I want you to do. And I mean, the entire meeting was about 10 minutes. I drove 12 hours for 10 minutes or something. And he said, look, I think you need to go get some experience in a small market. Mm-hmm. And I think you should go sell so you learn the business side of the market. And then come back to me in 3 to 5 years, and then let's have another conversation. And I was destroyed, just absolutely crushed. I couldn't believe it. I mean, didn't he know who I was and what I'd done and how hard I'd worked? And I left, and I was really, really upset about it, but I did exactly what he told me to do. So I wound up with my very first job was selling radio advertising on a small daytime only AM station in Beaufort, North Carolina, which during the winter has got about, 5,000-6,000 people. And during the summer, it picks up with all the tourists and the people living there for the summer. And I went and I started selling, $3 and $4 radio ads. But it was absolutely the right decision. And it was absolutely the best training ground and things that I learned there in that very first job, I've used throughout my career. And I happened to make a move and go to a little bit larger market and went up into Greensboro, Winston-Salem, High Point. And then one day I get a phone call from one of my coworkers, and he was supposed to be on a panel to talk to college students to tell them what we in broadcasting looked for on resumes to try to get a job inside broadcasting. And he had to get a root canal. Larry, will you please go sit in for me? So I did. And when I did, there was a lady on the panel, and she happened to be head of human resources for this brand new fledgling network called Fox. And she pulled me aside afterwards. She said, can we have a chat? I said, sure. And she said, there may be an opportunity for you at Fox. And long story short, that turned into me joining Fox when I was there when The Simpsons first launched. And then that led to a series of roles via a mentor who I met at Fox. And that later kind of led me down the path and kind of put me where I wound up going.
Wow.
So,
That's an amazing story, Larry. You drove 12 hours up to New York. You were so excited. And then, he was like, come back in 3 to 5 years. But I love how you took that and didn't let that defeat you to the point where you just gave up and went down a different path. You went back to North Carolina, you got the experience, and now, you're at where you're at today. So that's awesome. So thinking back to college, what's a myth about success that you believed as a college student, and what was that actual reality?
I go back to that concept that when I was coming out of school, I really genuinely thought that people were going to be waiting in line to hire me. That I was so terrific, and I'd worked so hard, and like so many of the people that are watching right now, I worked my way through college. I worked 3 jobs and went to school at the same time, full time. It was just the way I had to do it. So I had really worked hard, and I really thought that it was people were just going to throw jobs at me, and they were going to throw money at me, and well, sure, I'm probably going to get. This is at the time, I'm probably going to get 45, 50,000 a year. They'll probably give me a company car. And it was just a complete lie. It just, none of that was important. And it didn't come true. It was a matter of having to go prove yourself. And I think the other thing that I thought that it mattered from a grade standpoint, the classes I had taken, they really didn't care about it. That was, nobody ever asked me in any interviews what my GPA was. They wanted to know what I had done. They were interested in the jobs that I had done. They were interested in how I had overcome challenges. And so, if I was going to grad school, grades obviously are extraordinarily important. But just walking into the workforce, I really thought somebody was going to say, "So, Mr. Sands, what was your GPA?" And nobody asked me the question.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is the experience is powerful. So trying to get as many experience as possible as a college student. And, if you right now, Larry, could go talk to your college self, what's one thing you would tell him?
I think that I would probably say, don't rush into adulting as quickly as I wanted to. I was so tired of writing papers and doing all the things that when you're in your senior year of college, you're like, I am so done. All I want to do is get up and go start contributing. And I probably would tell myself, you know what, go throw a backpack on your back and go have an experience before you start in it, because once you start, it never stops. And I wish I would have taken that opportunity.
Yeah. So was there a moment or decision that just dramatically changed your career path?
Yeah, I think so. So I had this idea. I was running a television station in Sacramento, California. And I had this idea that there was, at the time, Jay Leno was on the Tonight Show. And he put what's now a very inexpensive thing, a flat screen TV, but at the time they were $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. And he had put it in a piece of furniture, and it would come up behind him, and they would have the video in there.
Yeah.
And in television, we do these over-the-shoulder graphics that when you're watching the news, it kind of. I said, wow, that would be great. That instead of having these over-the-shoulder graphics, I'm going to have it so the TV comes up out of the cabinet. That's going to be really cool. And I got a phone call from a buddy of mine, and he said, "Hey, are you still trying to do that?" Because I'd shared the idea with him. I said, "Yeah." He said, "Look, we just finished building out a station in Los Angeles. He was head of it, and he's got the extra TV. Why don't you come down and get it?" Wow. And so I drove from Sacramento to LA to pick up this TV. And as I'm walking by, I see my boss, and he was that same guy that had hired me at Fox so many years ago. Mm-hmm. And I'd followed him through a number of different opportunities. And every time that he said, "Hey, Larry, go walk through that wall," I walked through the wall. And he said, "Very good. Now go do it again." And I did it again. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I'm walking by and I got my baseball hat turned around backwards and I'm in jeans and a t-shirt on a Friday. And he looks at me and says, "What are you doing here? And why are you dressed like that?" And I said, "Well," I said, TV up and down, Jay Leno, I think it'll be cool. And then he looks at me and he says, "Puerto Rico." And I said, "Yeah, how's that acquisition going?" We were just closing on an acquisition of a network in Puerto Rico, this sort of standalone independent network in Puerto Rico.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "How's it going?" He said, "Larry, can you do me a favor? Can you fly down there and can you just tell me what's going on? I need another set of eyes. You speak some Spanish and just, see what you can find down there." I said, "Sure." So I got on a plane and when I walked into what later became my office on that Monday to have my first set of meetings, he was sitting there. And he said, "They really need you here." And I said, "Mike," I said, "I'm really happy in Sacramento." He says, "Larry, this is going to be the job of your life. You're going to be on the first name basis with governors and heads of state, and it's going to be fantastic."
Wow.
And I took a deep breath and I jumped and I did it.
That's awesome.
And I moved to San Juan, Puerto Rico, to a completely different culture where I had to do business in a completely different language that I am not a native speaker on. But I learned very quickly. And I think that if there's one decision that I made, it was going to Puerto Rico, just getting so out of my comfort zone and being challenged by that, to do business in a different culture, to do business in a different language, to do business in a different country. I think that was probably the biggest decision I think that I would look at and point to.
Yeah, I know it's crazy. I'm only 22, but even just looking back, thinking about how, one decision you can make could completely change everything, right? Imagine if you would have said no, Larry, like how different your future would have been from there. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Now, what do you think like one of the biggest challenges students face today? And what would be your advice for navigating that challenge? I know you shared some stuff on experience and, enjoying the moment and not rushing your future. What other, challenges do you think students might face today?
Well, I think there's a lot of challenges, and I think part of it is we're in an inflection point right now where students, specifically Gen Z, is coming into the workforce as Gen X and the boomers are still at the top of the food chain, but they're beginning to phase out, and millennials are sort of getting into those bigger leadership and hiring roles. And each one of those generations views business differently. And I would encourage students to really consider that as they look at opportunities, because you may think that work-life balance is your single most important thing, or you may be looking for a role that is going to ideally fulfill what your purpose or what you see your purpose is right now.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that just based on experience and what I can see, that's not always the way to go. I saw, and you may have seen the content. There's a creator out there that I watch and I follow, and somebody asked him on a panel what he thought the worst advice that he had ever gotten was, and it was, "Oh, follow your passion." And he said, because anybody who tells you follow your passion, they're already rich. He's like, go find something you're good at and make money and scale, and then that will allow you to follow whatever passions in life you may have.
Yeah.
And so I think that's sort of a bit of a trap, right? When I look at interviews and when I interview Gen Z, some of them are really on that, what are you going to do for me kind of thing. Well, what's in it for me? And it's sort of like, well, it's an opportunity to get in and start your career, and it's a paycheck, and, it's healthcare, and it's these other things. But, no, we're going to be in the office 5 days a week. And, there's some guardrails around how we choose to do business. And I think that's something that if I were sort of giving that guidance of just saying, take what you can get to get in, get employed, learn. Like, I think some of the best advice I ever got was, the Lord gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, use them proportionately. listen twice as much as you speak, and especially in these first roles, and be that person that raises their hand and says, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Just be that doer.
Yeah. I love it. Take action, get the experience, just learn is what I'm taking away from that. So now we're going to do a pick a question game here. So I'm going to, I want you to pick a number 1 through 5, Larry, and you won't know the question until you choose that number.
Okay. Number 2.
Let's see. One thing college did not prepare you for.
One thing that college, business. It's really interesting because pretty much nothing that I learned in the classroom was reality in business. And I think the reason is because the majority, I had one professor in undergrad who had been a former CEO or president who had actually had real experience in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
And it was his class that I got the most out of. So many of the classes that I took, and so much of the professors, they were all academics, and they had never really done a lot of stuff in business.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had a very different view than what I saw actually on the ground,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with you, right? And, I think it's important for these college kids to realize that, like, the experience, the learning part is important. Thinking back to the earlier, part of this interview here, when, Larry, you were sharing how you had some experience going up to New York and you were really confident that you were going to get that job until you sat down for 10 minutes and he said, hey, get 3 to 5 years of experience and then come back. So not everything you'll learn in the classroom is going to be applied. So that's why I think the hands-on action experience is most important. And, yeah. And now we're going to jump to some lightning questions here, which I like this part. So I'm going to ask you 6 questions and I want you to answer quick on the spot. They're going to be short answers. So the first one is your favorite college class.
Favorite college class was probably that, I'm going to go with labor relations.
Your go-to coffee order.
Black.
Best book or podcast recommendation.
I'm going to go with book. I'll go Tools of Titans, which I think is a really, really cool book. And I give it to people as gifts. I like that a lot. And then podcast. Oh, there's a bunch of them. I'll tell you one that I really enjoy is the All In podcast, which is Chamath Palihapitiya, Jason. What is Jason's last name? But it's 4 David Sachs. There's 4 CEOs that are really, really engaging. And they talk about a wide variety of subjects that I find to be very, very interesting. It's my favorite. It's what I look forward to on Fridays when I work out on Friday.
Yeah, I listen to it as well. Your best productivity hack.
Set a timer.
Dream mentor. He or she could be dead or alive.
I'll go with the one that I've got, Mike Wartzman. He was and is. He's been my mentor for the better part of 30 years, maybe a little bit more. He's the guy that originally hired me at Fox, and we still talk weekly. He's extraordinary, and he's now retired, although he does have a number of investments and a number of small companies that he's running, and still in his late 70s is still pursuing business and pursuing ideas, and just he loves to create, and I wouldn't go any further than just him.
That's awesome. And what's something you do every day that helps you stay grounded?
I read every day, and my latest obsession, if you will, is Marcus Aurelius and Stoicism. Mm-hmm. And I'm really that's helping me stay pretty grounded. So 10-15 minutes in the morning is a daily hack for me.
Love it. And What are three traits? This is, a separate question here. What are three traits, habits, or skills that, helped you go from a student to a successful CEO?
I'm going to say communication, number one.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that I think that Gen Z has a huge disadvantage of, and I'll tell you why. The ability to have a face-to-face conversation that is not texting, that is not pre-planned, right, is a skill. And when I was growing up, the phone in the kitchen would ring and I would answer it and I'd say, hello. And somebody would say, hi, Larry, it's Mr. Jones. Is your father there? Oh, one moment, Mr. Jones. Hi, Dad, it's Mr. Jones on the phone. Well, tell him I'm, indisposed. Ask him I've called. Mr. Jones, my dad is in the middle of something. He asked if I could, if he could call you back. Can I get your number, please? And that was a very normal conversation for a kid to have when I was growing up. That's gone. So Gen Z's practice and their ability to have those sort of conversations. I can't tell you how many kids have talked to me and I just don't like talking on the phone. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, but it's a skill. It's a skill that you have to have. I look at being remote and how many jobs are remote and not getting that face-to-face interaction with people. So I think that the ability to communicate and connect with people, and I think the biggest part of communication is being a good listener. And I don't just mean hearing what the person's saying so that you can, because you're trying to figure out what you're going to say next.
Right.
I mean, being a really active listener and staying extraordinarily curious. Because I would say that if anything, I'm just curious. I just want to know. And I have no problem at all being the dumbest guy in a room. Zero. I love being in rooms with people who are smarter than I am, that are better than I am, because I'm going to learn something. And I have no problem saying to them, I'm sorry, can you say, I just didn't understand. Help me understand a little bit better because I really want to learn. So I think there's a sense of curiosity has been just really invaluable and just outworking everybody. I remember my dad saying to me once, hey, look, we're not going to be the smartest ones in the room, but nobody's going to outwork us. And, that counts for a lot. It really does.
Yeah. And, it's sad because I agree with the communication specifically. And, part of my company, a big component of it, Larry, is I do coaching workshops and school assemblies for elementary, middle, and high school. In the past 2.5 years, we've impacted 40,000 students. And the number one skill we teach is communication, right? Learning how to start, expand, and end a conversation, presenting yourself, how to connect. So it's a needed skill. And this was an awesome interview. So if students can only remember 10 seconds from this interview, what should it be?
10 seconds from this interview. I'll tell you what, I'll end with one of our rules of the road. So when Mike and I went to work at Univision, we worked for a man named Jerry Perencio. And Jerry was extraordinarily private, just as private could be. So there's some things out there about him now, but he was very, very private. He would make huge donations, but they were always anonymous. He was really just an extraordinary leader. And he gave us 20 rules of the road. And the last rule of the road is always take the high road. Be tough but fair, and never never lose your sense of humor. I think that if somebody had to take something away from our time together today, it would be that. It would be always take the high road, do the right thing. Do the right thing. Be tough but fair, and never lose your sense of humor. And I think if you do that and you listen twice as much as you speak, you can be successful.
That's great. Yeah. And I think that's just what's going to lead to giving, finding your purpose, what brings you that joy, that happiness. So that's awesome. And, thank you for joining us. I appreciate you and your time, Larry. And thanks to everyone who's watching. If something resonated with you today, share it with a friend or mentor. These conversations are meant to inspire action and change. We'll see you next time on the CEO Speaker Series. Thank you again, Larry.
My great pleasure.